Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Manitoba Agriculture CropTalk webinar. If you have any questions during the presentation today, please type them into the question section of the GoToWebinar menu, and we will answer them at the end of the presentation. This webinar is being recorded, and you will receive a link to the recording. Thank you.
Thanks, Laurie. I'd like to welcome everybody to the March 30th edition of CropTalk, and today we are going to go back into talking a little bit about herbicides. Excuse me. We had Kim Brown on a couple weeks ago talking a bit about it, and I thought it was important that we could revisit some of the updates on some of the new herbicides that are out for 2022. Also to talk a little bit about some weed management strategies. Lots of talk about shortage of product, and maybe there could be some things as producers and industry people we could do to help alleviate some of the problems that these may cause. So again, it's a lot of good information today regarding how to manage weeds and an update on some of the new herbicides. So with that, I think we'll pass it over to Kim and get started with today's webinar.
Okay, let me know when you can see my screen. Might take a minute.
Yes, it does take a minute.
Yes, it does seem to take a minute this morning. I don't know why. I guess just while we're waiting, I know the snow is disappearing, so even some of our weed choices this spring, or our herbicide or our weed management strategies this spring, are probably going to be depending on seeding date and what the snow melt looks like. You know, are we in for an early seeding, a late seeding? Are we, do we have time for tillage ahead of time? That's something I was pretty concerned about last fall, using tillage as a management strategy for weed control. You know, with the extreme dryness that we were all experiencing. We've all had a good bit of snow this year. We're still not, completely out of the woods yet, but we definitely have a lot more moisture. So tillage is a much more attractive option this spring. Again, it's going to depend on the snow melt, if we get any late snowfalls, and how quickly you want to get in the field and get that crop going. But that's another management tool that's back on the table this spring, which I'm very glad we have that tool now.
We can see your screen now, Kim.
Oh, super. Okay, thank you. I'm just going to change my pointer so that we can see a little bit better here. So yeah, okay, well, thanks very much for having me on, Lionel and Laurie, and it's really nice to start these up again for the year. I think they're occurring now once a week going forward. Are we there? Is that right, Lionel? Sorry, I think we are starting weekly soon, aren't we, on these? Or is that in
starting in April? Okay. Starting in April, yeah.
Super, thank you. Okay, so I want to update you on new products for 2022. Our guides are available now. Our guide to crop protection is available, and Lionel's going to talk about that when I'm done my presentation. So I'm going to show you some things that are new in the guide, and I'll go through some of the products that I want to highlight, because we do have some new products which are really great. So generally, I want to go through the guide. The structure of the guide is set up that there's some general info at the beginning of the guide. And this is where we have information on like safety, drift, mixing, sprayer cleaning, crop and weed staging. So that's been in the front of the guide for a long time. Very little of that changed. That really didn't change at all this year. When we get to the weed section of the guide, and our guide is set up with it has weeds, diseases, and insects, and there's in between the disease and insect section, there's the seed treatments as well. Of course, I think the most important part's the weed section. It's by far the biggest section, and it's the most complex. We have the most products, and with the tank mixes and with all the generics, it's big, and it's getting bigger and bigger every year. We've added another 20 pages on in total to the weed section this year, and that seems to be happening every year. Our guide is getting bigger and bigger. But in the weeds section, before we get to, there's lots of good stuff in there. So we start off with a whole section on integrated weed management. That is crucial, especially in every year. but especially this year. There's the yield loss tables. Now, those have been there for a very long time, but that's very good research that was done a while ago. That research hasn't been redone. It would be nice to see more research like that, but that research just isn't getting done anymore. But that is very good research to look at when you're talking about wild oats and green foxtail and that type of thing. There is a new section on brush control. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. There's the resistance, which is a site of action table that gets more and more important every year when we're talking about resistant weeds. There's a section in there on how herbicides work when we talk about the like the symptoms in plants and how quickly they work and that type of thing, and adjuvants. And that is a section too that does seem to be getting more complex each year too. There's a lot more products and things on the market. We get to the weed control tables. Now these are the tables where you flip to the guide, you find the wheat table, you're looking for, you've got a certain weed, and the weeds are arranged along the top, and the products come down the first column on the left hand side, and basically all your products are in there, and you kind of start matching up your products and your weeds depending on what you're looking for and what you need for weed control. We have a section on special weed problems. So some of the weird and wonderfuls that aren't necessarily going to show up in those tables, they may or may not show up on all of the labels as well, or on the product pages as well. Something that we're going to talk about too later in this talk is the recropping restrictions for residual herbicides. That's a very important table. There's been some changes, some label changes that have been reflected both on our product pages and also in this table as well. And you need to be really aware of this, especially this year coming off a couple of very dry years, and your rainfall table is in there. Rainfall data, like how many hours of rain fast you need before for each product. It's not necessarily on every label, but if it is on the label, it is in our rainfall table. So after that, oops, why is now my computer's frozen. Shoot.
Just click your screen, might activate it again.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, thanks, Lori. I should have thought of that. Thank you. You're a lifesaver. When we get to the product pages, this is not the label, and I can't stress that enough. This is not the label. This is a representation of the label. We try to take the same amount of information from all of the labels and we put it on our product pages so that you have the same information and you can compare and contrast, and we do it all in the same format. We start with the name, the brand name if it's a standalone product. If it's a generic and there's multiple products, then the generic name is there, and then the brand names will be listed below. We have the company, we have the PCP number. That's very important. The PCP number is a distinct number. It's kind of like our social insurance number. That's a number distinct to this particular product. And so the PCP numbers are there. If you need a label, you can usually get that off of a company website, but the easiest place too is this pesticide label search for Health Canada. You can just type that in. It's actually quite easy to do on a phone as well. Easiest to search by the PCP number. But again, you can put in the name as well. It's just sometimes when you put the name in there, you do get a lot come up on your search. Anyways, if you do need to look at an actual herbicide label, the label is the legal document, and our product pages are a representation of that. We've taken the most important information and we've put it into our guide for you to look at, so you don't have to look through an entire label. However, it is important for you to realize that you do need to go to the label and make sure you fully understand that complete label. And this is just a snip here off of the front page of our guide that says this publication is only a guide. Always refer to the product label for application details and precautions. So new in the guide, I'm not going to go through much of this. I've just taken a snip here of this page. Here on page 51, we have something called brush control, and there's like a page and a half of this. And so this is new, and we are finding, this is just some information. Information isn't really out there anywheres, and we do have products in the guide that are for brush control and vegetation control and non-crop areas and roadsides and rights of ways and that type of thing. And so because of that, we do have this section on brush control and talk about the different types of brush control. There's foliar application. We talk about stump treatments and that type of thing. So, again, a different section of the guide, but that is new this year. If you are looking for some information on that, if you're clearing bush or you're doing any work in an area where you have to do brush control, this section is in there. And we also have this new table, and I've highlighted here. It's the last table in our product tables, and it's our industrial vegetation products. And again, lots of these are things that you're not familiar with in crop. The odd time too, some of these products will have a rangeland component as well. Those products will show up in the forage table. So something like here, down here at Navius, there's actually the identical product is True Range. That's a new product in the guide this year, and that's a pasture product, which is exactly the same as Navius, but our Navius or Navius, it's here in our industrial vegetation products. So that is new. This table came in last year, and we're adding to it as we are making sure we have a good complete list of what is being used. So that's new. Another new section is actually plant growth regulators. This is at the end of the weed part before the disease part. It starts on page 446, so that tells you that we have 445 pages of weed stuff in this guide. The plant growth regulator section, it's a new section because we now have 2 products. We did have manipulator in there before. It was just in with the herbicides. It is a product that is registered by PMRA, so it's a plant growth regulator. It makes plants smaller. That's the things that PMRA regulates. Basically herbicides and things that make plants smaller, which is like in this case is plant growth regulator. So we do have this as its own section, and so there is a bit of an information here at the beginning, and then in the section there are only 2 products. Now that we have 2 products, they have their own section, and there was manipulator, which has been in the guide for a number of years, and there's also new Modus, which is from Syngenta. So that is a new section in the guide as well. If you're looking for those, they are at the end of the weed section before the fungicide section. So then our table, first thing we're looking at in the spring when we look at our weed control tables, this table 16A, herbicides to control weeds before seeding or after seeding, but prior to crop emergence. So this is what we call our burn-off tables, and these are the products that you would add in with glyphosate, or some of them they can stand alone, but a lot of times they can be with glyphosate. There is this line in here that says the following products may or must be mixed with glyphosate, and so if there's a little plus in there, then by the label it's supposed to be mixed with glyphosate when it's used in this situation. I've highlighted we do have 4 new products on this guide, in the guide this year, 4 new burn-off products. And so again, this table though, 16A is the herbicides, and then across the page on 16B is the same herbicides but the weed spectrum. So you look at the crop, look at what's available. If I'm looking at wheat, we have then this final column here on the very right hand side. If you follow my pointer coming all the way down, we have tons of products there. And again, you would look to table 16B to see what weeds they control. And then again, you would go to the product pages in the guide. I do apologize, and you'll notice going forward, we have lost our product pages here are blank. There was a bit of a formatting issue when it went to the printer, and there was some errors. And so rather than it have errors, it's been left blank. So I do apologize for that. If it's something that you're going to be using a lot, you can get a summer student maybe to go through and throw some page numbers in if you want. But most things are in there alphabetically, or they're in there by, something like here, Fluoracealam, that's in there by the generic name. Here also we see if it's a highlighted, that's a trade name or a brand name like Clean Start, and if it's a generic, then it's not highlighted. So that's another clue too for when you're looking up products in the guide. So our new pre-seed or pre-emerge products, our burn-off products, this Beluca herbicide, it's from Belgium. It's a pelargonic acid, which is a group 26. It's a very different than what we've got in the guide already. We don't have anything like this. And it's a pre-seed up to 3 days post-seeding and pre-emergent though for cereals and pulses. It also can be used as a harvest aid in wheat, barley, oats, and potato. And it also post-harvest and non-crop areas. So it's got multiple use patterns that are beyond the pre-seed burn-off, and it's got numerous broadleaves and some grasses as well on the label. So you could look to the product page to get some information on that, or again, pull the label from the PMRA site. A new one that it actually came out last year and we had it in our guide, in our addendum, was Certitude from Corteva. This is a co-pack of bromoxynil and topramazone, which is a group 27. That's basically your Armazon or your Impact and Merge. It's got Merge as well. And so it is I believe it's a half rate of this Armazon or Impact if you're looking at the rate structures, and it's for pre-seed canola. And at that lower rate, the only labeled weeds are kochia and volunteer canola, because it is a lower rate of the topramazone, and then also whatever glyphosate, the weeds that glyphosate gets. So you would be mixing this with glyphosate, so your glyphosate weeds plus your kochia and your volunteer canola. And you know, this is a great product to get that group 2 and that group 9 resistant kochia if you've unfortunately got that as well. And a very good volunteer canola product as well. So that's new in the guide this year, although we did see that on the ground last year. This is new this year it's called IPCO Trigon, and it's from Interprovincial Cooperatives Limited, and it's a co-pack. So when it's a co-pack, it means the products are in there in separate jugs. And it's carfentrazone, which is our aim, our bromoxynil, which is our partner. I'm just giving you the historical names of you know, before they went generic, if that helps you identify with some of these. But we are going to have to start to know more, you know, our active ingredients, because there are so many generics and so many different brand names and trade names on the market now. And it's also got clomazone in here. That's basically our command. It's pre-seed canola. And so what this does, it gives you extended suppression of cleavers emergence, plus all the weeds that this carfentrazone and bromoxynil would get. That's your Conquer co-pack. So it would get all those weeds, plus you're going to get extended cleaver, your cleavers as they emerge. So there's that one. Now, new from BASF this year is Smolder. Now, this is co-formulated, so it's just together. It's put together in one jug. It's saflufenicil, that's our heat product, and metsulfuron methyl, that's basically ally. And so this is group 14 plus a group 2. So it's nice to see these group 14s. It's good to be able to use these. It's a newer group we haven't used. I mean, we've been using heat for quite a while, but again, it's nice. There is, you know, worldwide, and I'm always going to talk about herbicide resistance. We do have group 14 resistance showing up, but not nearly to the extent that we have some of the chemistries that we've been using for a very long time, like our group 2s. We have a lot of group 2 resistant, you know, we have a lot of group 9 resistance, and we are starting to see resistance, of course, to the group 14s as they get used more and more, but luckily not a lot of that yet. So it's pre-seed and also post-harvest for barley and wheat, and that includes durum, spring, and winter. And it's basically the amount of heat in here is similar to that 80-acre rate of heat, but it's going to get those group 2 resistant weeds, especially, you know, we're talking kochia there. For a lot of our guys here in the Southwest, kochia has been a big issue. And especially the last couple of years where we had, you know, very poor moisture situations, increasing salinity, and kochia just seems to keep growing and growing and growing. You're also going to get some secondary flushes of your volunteer canola again with this product. So that's a really good product to look at. And lastly, Veraxor. Now, this is new from BASF. Now, it's co-formulated. Now, this is a new one. This is trifludimoxazin, which is a group 14. That's a new group 14 for us. It's a slightly different group. Within the group 14s, we have different subgroups within each herbicide site of action. And also saflufenicil, again, our heat plus merge. Now, it's pre-seed or pre-emergent field peas, lentils, field corn, soys, wheat, all kinds of wheat, durum, spring, winter, barley, and also chem fallow. And there's a rate range in here. The upper rates will control secondary flushes of cleavers, kochia, lamb's quarters, red root pig, weed, stinkweed, volunteer canola, and wild mustard. So because of there's a rate range in there, that's something to talk to your BASF rep, talk to your retailer, and, you know, be comfortable with that product and what your expectations of it are, you know, where the price point is at and that type of thing. But this is I think a really interesting product, a really great product to be looking at this year. And we, you know, when we talk about these flushing weeds, this is what we need. If we can get these weeds before they, before they're even coming out of the ground, that's a really good thing. It gives us less weeds to spray in crop. I'm going to talk about this later on in the talk, but, you know, really important to start using residual products that have that extended period of weed control, especially when our in crop or our post weed controls are limited or lacking or, you know, unavailable for any reason. It's important to have that extended weed control. So starting to use these products that give us that, that's a really great option, and it's something that we just have to start looking at. So for new post-emergent herbicides, for our crops, our main crops, there's Ammo, DR, Audible, C-Ray, Image, Lotus, Prominex, Centralis, and Tough. I'm going to go through these ones. For pasture, we've got True Range. I'd mentioned that earlier. It's basically exactly the same product as our Navius Flex, but it's got a pasture registration on there. Industrial, we've got Clearview, Milestone, Sightline. These are basically the same, similar to our Reclaim and our Restore. But they've got with and without, they're basically different variations on the theme. So there's, depending on the weed spectrum and depending where you're using it, they're all quite similar. Telar is in there now. Again, that's the old Glean, but that's in there. And numerous generics. I have not listed them, but basically anything in there that you thought would be, that was a generic, there's probably another brand name of it somewhere. Some generics have dropped off the table. Some of these come and go. But again, when you look at our products that have been out for quite a while, we do have more and more brand names coming on the generics as well. So basically, and when we get a new generic, that's just another, that goes onto that generic product page. They don't get a new page of their own, but they'll just be another listing for another different generic that you can buy from a different company. But normally they're exactly the same active ingredient, but you do have to be careful. Some of them do have a slightly different use pattern, but that will be noted in the product pages of the guide. And of course, you could always go to the product label to check that for sure. So I'm going to go through these crop ones. Ammo DR is from AgriCity. This is a pre-packaged tank mix, so it's a bunch of different products all packaged together. It's basically ammo, which is dicamba, that's group 4. It's Empower 2,4-D ester, that's 2,4-D, that's group 4 again. And it's their Empower R, which is thiophensulfuron, tribenuron at the 2-to-1 ratio, and that's a group 2, and that's for spring wheat and barley. So that has its own product page in the guide because there isn't anything else that is exactly like this. If there's more than one, if there was more than one brand name, then we would basically have that on a page where we would have all the brand names that had exactly the same active ingredients together. But this is a standalone product, so it does get its own page in the guide. So you'll see that alphabetically in the guide. We also have Audible. This is from Rotam. This is a prepackaged tank mix of Draft, which is thiophensulfuron to tribenuron at the 2-to-1 ratio. That's a group 2, plus fluroxypyr. That's a group 4. And it's for barley, wheat, which is your durum, spring and winter, and also your oats. So that's in the guide as well. That's new this year. Now, C-Ray, this is a new product from Bayer. It's a co-formulated with panoxidin, which is basically our axial with group 1, and phenoxyprop, and which is another group 1, but that's Puma. So it's a co-formulated axial and Puma. It's roughly 2/3 of a rate of panoxidin and a half of the high rate of phenoxyprop, if you're looking at the rates there. So there is obviously some synergy when you put products together. Now, you know, there's been a lot of chatter about this one. I've been asked about this, you know, why was it registered? It wouldn't have gotten a registration if it wasn't effective. It will be effective. There is synergy when you put products together. This is cut rates, and we've talked about how cut rates can contribute to resistance. If you already had resistance to group 1, then this is obviously not going to work because you already have group 1 resistance. But the label, you know, there is a label on this, so they were, you know, they have proven that this works. And so again, when you don't have the resistance, then this is a product that could work as long as your group 1s are working. You know, this is a good product. There's lots of tank mix options with this one, available for spring wheat and barley. And it's the weeds on the label are green and yellow foxtail. You know, this would be an excellent foxtail product. Our phenoxyprop, our good old Puma, was a really good foxtail product. Barnyard grass, wild oats, and also Persian darnel, if you have that. I think they have that mostly in Saskatchewan. I honestly haven't seen that in Manitoba, but if anybody ever finds that, let me know, because I'd like to see it in person. Lotus. Now this is new from Bayer. This is a Tembotrione, group 27. This is brand new for us, and it's for use in the Red River Valley only. So we stress that is actually on the product page, right up front and center with by the Lotus title there. It's for field and sweet corn, and it's from 2 to 8 leaf stage, so it can be used a bit later in corn if it needs to be put on a bit later. That's nice to see that products that can be used a bit later on, you know, all the way up to that 8 leaf stage. With corn, you have to be careful. Some of them, you know, are you have to turn off the taps. I guess you can't use them. Some of them you have to watch. They're only available up to about the 6 leaf stage. And so this is, again, nice to see a product that we can use a bit later. There's a different rate structure in here. So this is on the product page, and, you know, go to the label to get more information. There's a 60 mil per acre rate. That'll get your lamb's quarters, your common ragweed, your red root pigweed. If you bump that to 73 mils an acre, you will get these weeds, obviously, but you'll also get kochia. And if you bump that to 90 mils an acre, you will obviously get, you know, the lamb's quarters, the common ragweed, the red root pig, the kochia, but you'll also get the Canada fleabane, the giant ragweed, the green foxtail, water hemp, that's a big one, and wild buckwheat. So, you know, this is a really good product to be looking at. You need to add adjuvant and UAN. Here, the rates are on there, and that's in the product page as well and on the label. Can do a repeat application for control or suppression of late emerging weeds in this list, but you need to be at least 10 days apart on your applications. And for recropping, this is all that's on the label. These are all these are the only crops that have been tested. If you have questions on other crops, you'd have to ask the company about that, but this is all that's on the label right now, and this is what's on our product pages. So winter wheat can be 3 to 4 months after application. Soy, field corn, sweet corn, spring wheat, and potato the year after application, and dry beans 22 months after. So for your corn growers, it looks a nice new product, and I think a lot of us were able to see this last year, you know, in trials and that type of thing, and it's nice to have another group 27. So this is group 27. Again, that's that same group as cloprimazone, which is your Armazon or your Impact. So it's just a different group 27, but in that same group. These are what we call the HPPD inhibitors. And so these are bleachers, work very quickly. You know, weeds turn white very quickly, and you see fairly rapid death you'll see results on these group 27s pretty quickly. And also really good synergy with the group 27s and the group 5s, like the atrazine. So Prominex, this is new from Corteva. This is co-formulated haloxafen, which is a group 4, clopyralid, another group 4, and fluroxapyr, which is another group 4. So all group 4s, but it's co-formulated. It's all put together in one jug. This is for wheat, durum, spring and winter, and barley. And lots of tank mix options, and also compare it with the other Corteva products. So there's Corteva's got a really good lineup of products. Really look at your weed spectrum and look at what combinations of haloxafen with and without clopyralid, with or without fluoroacetam. There's lots of really good products from Corteva, and again, just look at your weed spectrum and where you need to go, and they have a really good array of products to choose from when it comes to broadleaf weed control. But this is a new co-formulated. This packaging is new with these 3 products co-formulated. Centralis is new from FMC. It's co-formulated thiophensulfuron, which is group 2, and fluroxapyr, and it's for wheat, durum, spring and winter, barley and oats. And then Image is from Sharda. It's imazamox. It's a group 2. It's basically the same thing as Solo, but it does have its own product page because it's for Clearfield wheat only. So we didn't want that to get lost with all the other on the same pages as the products for the other Clearfield crops, because this is a product that is imazamox, but it is only for Clearfield wheat. So if you are growing Clearfield wheat, then this product is there for you. And this is the last one I think I want to talk about today on this. This is Tough 600 EC. This is a new product from Belgium. This is exciting. We haven't seen a new group 6 in a long time, so that it's Pyridate group 6. That's the same group as our partner, our bromoxynil. So it's a burn-off, a contact herbicide. It's for pre-seed or pre-emergent canola, chickpeas, field corn, sweet corn, field peas, and lentils. It's also post-emergent in corn up to the 8-leaf stage, and I think chickpeas as well. I just don't have them here. We don't grow those here in Manitoba. Now, there is a label update with new weeds and rates. This has come out since the guide was printed, so we weren't able to get that into the guide, but that is on the new label. Again, this is why it's always important to be checking labels rather than just the product pages that are in the guide. Our guide is as up to date as it can be. When it went to print, the label was a little bit different for Tough, but the updated labeled rates of weeds and rates here are false cleavers at the low rate here. Then we've got black nightshade, red root pigweed. Our rates are increasing here, and there's a bit of a rate range in here. Lamb's quarters, kochia, wild mustard, in here, and then water hemp, but it's suppression only at this high rate. So again, now this false cleavers, that's very similar to regular cleavers. They're basically, one is gallium, the Latin names are, one is gallium, this one I think is Gallium Spurium, and the real, or the not false cleavers, is Gallium Aperine, if I'm saying that right, but they're very similar. The leaves are just slightly different, but again, very, very similar, just basically cleavers. You're probably all calling it cleavers. It doesn't really matter. So products that were registered in the guide, but they're not in the guide because they came after the guide deadline. And this is Authority Supreme on sunflowers. We already had the 2 products anyways. We had sulfentrazone and pyroxasulfone registered. This is a co-formulated, so it's the 14 and the 15 together, pre-plant or pre-emergent, which is up to 3 days after seeding, but it's got to be pre-emergent to both weeds and crop. And it's got residual residual properties there. So you've got weeds, you're going to get a good long period in there that you've got weeds, weed control. And it's for grasses and broadleaf weeds, basically. So again, Authority Supreme is in the guide, so that product page is in there. It's just the sunflower registration is not there. So that is something to add in. And when you get your guides, just add that onto the sunflower page and just, put that right on the product page for Authority Supreme. Talking about herbicide shortages. So, this has been on our minds since last year. This started happening midsummer even last year. There were some, physical issues with plants, shutdowns because of fires and different things, and lots of things happening in the world right now that we have absolutely no control over. Obviously, COVID's been a huge part of it too, with shipping and different components of different herbicides. Lots of herbicides are made in different places in the world, and there's different components while they're being made that are needed. So it's just, there's been a lot of problems this year. It's not just one thing, it's a number of things. So while some herbicides are known to be short, expect supplies to be tight on almost everything. So you cannot expect to be able to walk up to your retailer and go to the chem shed and get what you want, especially on some products. We know they're going to be very, very tight, but you need to be really careful. I think all products we should expect to be in really short supply, and you need to be really careful and make sure you have what you need in crop, or you can get it in crop before, you should not be putting crops in the ground if it's dicey that you're going to get the herbicides to use in crop on that particular crop. Then that's pretty scary. So I've been saying this since last fall. If this works for you, book it, buy it, and take it home. When it's in your shed, you have it. But again, that's really tough these days. Shipping from the manufacturers has been delayed, and things are slowly moving now, but again, supplies are super tight everywhere, and you just need to be really in constant contact with your your retailer and to know if you can get to find out that you can get what you need. So also, scouting is really, really important. We always should be scouting, and we should always be spraying the chemistries we need, but know exactly what you need to spray. So if you're looking at the weed spectrum, say you've always been doing whatever you've always been doing, we may not be able to do that this year, probably can't do that this year. So you may be able to, eliminate some sprays. Now, depending what the spring looks like, we were talking at the beginning of the presentation, just before my slides were coming up, about the snow melt this spring and what is our spring going to look like. There's a lot of bare ground showing now. We still could get some snowstorms. We're not even into April yet, so we still could get a significant amount of snow. That has happened before. But right now we've had a pretty decent snow melt. A lot of the snow has melted in. We haven't had a lot of runoff yet, so our soils have been recharged. Right now it looks like we could have an early spring, but that might not happen. Depending on what our spring looks like, depending on how wet our soils are, when are we going to be seeding? When are we going to be in there? Do we have time for tillage? I'm really thankful that we are able to use that tool. That's a tool that's a really great tool that we need to use, judiciously. when we can and when we need it, because that's a good weed control tool. There's nothing that's resistant so far, anyways, to cold hard steel. And you know, this is something that this spring is looking promising, but again, it's going to depend on when we want to be in there seeding, and will we have time to do, you know, some pre-seed tillage as well. But having said that, when are these weeds coming up? Now, the last few years in the spring, we haven't had a lot of weed growth because we were just really dry. That's not the case this year. Expect there to be a flush of weeds. Expect the ground to be green. We've got moisture. The minute we have any kind of heat, the weeds are going to grow. And that's going to be different than what we saw, you have seen in the last couple of years. So again, scouting to know what you're up against, pick the best product, see if you can get it. Add a product to glyphosate. That burn-off table, especially for a crop like wheat, which we're growing a lot of that this year. You know, that's our second biggest crop in Manitoba. Tons of products that we can use in that crop, and add something for burn-off. That can you can reduce your glyphosate down to half a liter from 1, you know, if that was something you were doing before, was just going in and spraying with a liter of glyphosate, depending on the weeds and the weed spectrum that's there. Use residual products to extend weed control into the critical weed-free period. And you'll see this referred to in literature, but the critical weed-free period is a duration of time that the crop must be kept weed-free to minimize the yield loss. And it's different for every crop. I'm going to give you an example. The critical weed-free period for soybeans. This is a study done by Dr. Rob Golden here in Manitoba, and where they were actually looking at a bunch of different factors, but the biggest one was narrow rows versus wide rows for a critical weed-free period for soybeans. And they found that, you know, from a weeds perspective, narrow rows will shorten this critical weed-free period by up to 3 developmental stages. So that is really good news. We're covering in, we're be able to shade out some weeds, and you know, that really helps us a lot with our weed control this year. Higher plant densities shorten the critical weed-free period as well, so keeping the seeding rates up. The cultivar, now that depended from site to site in this trial, but the plant architecture and the stature, we know our soybeans, some can be big and bushy, some are a little less, they're more a little bit skinnier, they don't bush out quite so much. You know, so those different, you know, being able to manipulate that with densities, and also narrow versus wide rows, that helps us shorten that critical weed-free period. And again, that helps us with our weed control that year because we're covering the ground. So basically shortening this critical weed-free period again means that the crop will outcompete the weeds earlier, and there's less need for weed control later, and we may only need 1 in-crop spray. And that's really important this year because you may only get 1 in-crop spray. I've always been a big fan of 2, as we know, when we're talking the glyphosate or the glufosinate tolerant crops. I'm a big fan of 2 sprays. I really think that's the best weed control you can get, but realistically, you're probably not going to have access to that this year. You're probably going to get it once, and you need to use it well. So again, now here, this is a soybean table. This is where we're talking about adding in some of those residuals. You know, I talked about, we have the burn-off table as well. You look to see what burn-off product you could use, but if you were looking to do a residual with something like a soybean, still talking about that critical weed-free period here, if you're using some of these in here, sorry, not clean start, this one shouldn't, sorry, I was doing this talking about some of these products that can be used here. Sorry, this is our burn-off table on soybeans, and this is our Amitrol Clean Start glyphosate. So here's your burn-off product. So again, no residual on these, but if you're looking at soybeans, you would put these in first, no residual. But then when you go to we're looking for the residual tables, this would be where we actually go into the actual crop. This is our table 6, our weed control in soybean. And what I've highlighted here are the ones that have residual action. So Authority and Authority Supreme and Dicamba. Now you can use that in crop as well, but again, if you're using it up front, then that gives you residual well into when those soybeans are growing, and gives you extended weed control while that crop is growing and filling in those rows. We've got Edge, you know, we've got Fierce, we've got Focus, we've got Heat Complete. Now this is the weeds that are coming from that residual component of Heat Complete. The burn off part of Heat Complete, that would be in the burn off table, the weeds that are killed by the burn off. Some older chemistries down here as well. Linuron, Metolachlor, that's dual. Metribuzin, that's Syncor plus Treflan. That's a PPI, pre-plant incorporated. Roundup Extend. because we've got the dicamba in there, trifluralin, that's our Treflan, Valterra, and finally Zidua. So these highlighted ones in here, and this is, you can do this in your guide as well. You can just take a highlighter and highlight across. We're strongly urging you to use these products first thing in the spring. They work on weed seeds as they emerge, and also it just gives you that extended period of weed control. So you can couple that with, you know, something from the burn off table. And, you know, this is a really good strategy if you're only going to get one in-crop spray on your soybeans this year, or on some of your other row crops as well. So we know that glyphosate, glufosinate in crop are going to be short. We've known that for a long time. We've been trying to plan for that. You should be able to cover your acres once, maybe twice, but I doubt that. I would not count on that at all. And also, you may not be able to get the rate you want. You know, you're just going to have to, you're going to get what you get in this. So when you are only able to cover the acres once, and you may not be at the highest rate that you want, depending on how much product you can actually get your hands on, you need to make it count. So you've got to have the right water volume and nozzles for coverage. And again, more water is better. Even with glyphosate, if you don't have hard water issues, then you can go to higher water volumes. You've got to get really good coverage. And especially with glufosinate, coverage is everything. The more water you can put on, the better. If you think it looks, you know, weed control looks great with glufosinate at 10 gallons, you should see it at 15. It is tremendous. It will smoke your grasses, your grass weeds at 15 gallons of water. It does a really good job. So again, the more water you can put on, use the right nozzles, make sure, you know, watch your weed staging, watch, you know, keep your ground speed low, watch the environmental conditions for spraying, do everything you can to make that spray count. When we're talking about harvest aids going forward this year, the supply may change a bit over the growing season, but if you have to give up a place to use herbicides, this is it. You don't have to use your harvest aids in every single case. You still, even if you're using a pod shatter canola and you were used to desiccating that, I mean, we still can use products like Reglone and that type of thing. Make sure, again, you can get supply of those. Again, supply on everything could be tight this year, but again, going forward, supplies may open up a bit for some other products, but you may, if you have to give up a use, you just may not be able to get what you want, but that's manageable. Harvest aids, you know, we can manage without them. We can't manage without an in-crop spray. We have to have those in-crop sprays. That plan has to be in place this spring. For post-harvest weed control, again, supply may change. We may have everything opened up and we might be able to get our hands on whatever we want. We have no idea at this point. We don't know. But depending on how your in-crop weed control went, you're really going to have to watch. You may not have satisfactory results. With perennials, you're hard to kill weeds. There may be misses. If we're only getting to spray once in crop, then we need to you know, then and if we get lots of rain throughout the growing season, we may have lots of weeds coming after that we're just not able to get. We may miss them. And again, is it something that we can deal with at harvest? Is it something, or at harvest or after harvest? Again, you know, we're really going to have to monitor pretty carefully this summer. So we need to go back to the basics. Integrated weed management is absolutely crucial, and we need to grow good competitive crops. The best herbicide you have in the shed is actually a competitive crop, and everything you do to get that crop going properly, proper seeding date, you know, maybe wait a bit till that ground's warm and make sure that crop gets up and gets going ahead of the weeds. If you look at the tables at the front of the guide that talk about the crop competition coming from wild oats, whether they're one leaf stage behind a crop versus the same leaf stage as the crop, or one leaf stage ahead of the crop, it's vastly different as to how competitive those wild oats are. So if you get that crop up and going ahead of the weeds, that's huge. So do everything you can to get that crop up and growing quickly, get a vigorous crop going. So seed treatments, you know, seed place fertilizer, we don't want too much there. We don't want to burn that crop. We want all that seed coming up, you know, increasing seeding rates, you know, seed by plant population, not just by weight, not just by the bushel, that type of thing. All of the things that we do to get a good crop going, that's even more crucial this spring when we are going to be limited on weed control in crop. So again, I can't stress that enough. And that's going to be more important going forward every year, because we do have lots of issues with herbicide resistance, and a lot of weeds are becoming resistant to the chemistries that we're using. And we just aren't, you know, we're losing tools that we are used to using in crop. And we're going to have to look at managing our weeds in multiple ways, not just you know, pulling in with a sprayer and spraying something and pulling out of the field and you know, everything's fine and we're good to go. That's not happening anymore. Weed control in the future, a lot more management. We need to look at our pre-seed burn-offs, our pre-seed residuals in the tank, you know, when we get into, you know, more products in the tank, more mixes, that type of thing. But especially this year, utilizing those pre-seed burn-offs and those pre-seed residuals, that's crucial, especially, you know, get us through that critical weed-free period, which again is different for each crop. Obviously, our narrow row cereals, our narrow row canola, those are usually very competitive. If we get them up and above our canola, really watch that again for other pests like cutworms and flea beetles and that type of thing. So because we want to get that crop up and going ahead of all of the pests. And again, as soon as we get, you know, we get shading that ground, we get a lot better. We get our crop competition helping us with our weed control. And again, I can't stress this enough. Your relationship with your agronomist, your industry, and your retail is absolutely crucial for planning this year and onward. And so you guys need to be really, you know, talking with your people, the people that help you farm, and really working together, because this is a really tough year going forward from a number of reasons. But you know, chem supplies is it's dicey this spring. So there's lots of information available. Manitoba Agriculture, MASC, if you're looking at, you know, different crops, different rotations, there's lots of information there on the MASC website about historical crop yields and that, things like that. You know, if we are talking about, you know, crop rotations and that type of thing, there's lots of information there. Industry webinars, there's loads of information. We have 10 service centers open across the province, so there's lots of information there. You can walk, they're open, walk in, pick up some information, and of course there's all of our phone numbers. There's the 1-800 numbers at the 10 service centers. So if you do want to talk to one of us with Manitoba Agriculture, we are always available to help where we can. So that's all I have for now, Lionel, if you wanted to take it from here.
Okay, yeah, Kim, I've got one question before I ask you the question on sunflowers. The one question came in was regarding dry beans. It says, since Zuda is registered on peas, lentils, soybeans, can it be used on dry beans?
I don't think so. No, and you could check with BSF on that, but I don't think so. I'm just checking my guide right now. That is the last product. I'm sure it's not, and there's probably a very good reason for that. So I would check on that, but to my knowledge, it's not.
Okay.
Not. That's pyroxasulfone. So that's pyroxasulfone, that's Zidua, and that's pre-seed and pre-emergent. Yeah, field corn and soybeans, and yeah, lentils, potatoes, chickpeas. I would check on that again. I don't know for sure on dry beans, but I would say no.
Okay. Okay, and then the question that I received was, haven't grown sunflowers in years. What are some of the products available for using for weed control this year? And are there residuals that I should be concerned about with growing sunflowers?
Sure. Yeah, and that is an excellent question. With what is happening in the Ukraine and them being a sunflower exporter and, you know, producing a lot of the world's sunflowers and exporting them, that's a big issue. And I know there is a lot of people interested in sunflowers right now. So Lionel actually had let me know about that question earlier this morning. So I put together a few slides very quickly. If you're new to sunflowers, there is this sunflower production guide, which is available from the National Association of Canada. They have people here in Carmen. This guide is available online. We do have physical copies of it as well. We have some of those in Carmen, but your local service center, those 10 service centers that are open across the province would have those. But this is a PDF, you can download that. So there's lots of issues with sunflowers, but basically this is a really good tool to have if you've been away from it for a while. And it's got a lot of good pictures, especially of some of the, you know, the insect pests. That's another issue, not weeds obviously, but a lot of insect issues with sunflowers. So this guide covers those really well. When you're looking at weed control in sunflowers, you need to be using a residual product. There is no point going into sunflowers if you are not using a residual product. So you have got to spend that money up front and get a residual product down that buys you many weeks of extended weed control. This is a row crop. It takes a long time to cover the ground. Off the top of my head, I can't remember what the critical weed-free period is, but it's long. It's very long. It's something like a soybean crop. It takes a long time, like a wide row soybean. It takes a long time to cover the ground. You have very little weed control coming from the plants, or very little crop competition coming from the plants for a very long time. And we can get a lot of weeds going in there on that nice bare ground in between those wide rows. So you're looking at products like Authority or Authority Charge, you're looking at Edge, you're looking at Focus, Trifluralin, and there's that Zidua, that pyroxasulfone, that's a group 15 in there. There also is Authority Supreme. This is recently registered. Now, we had both components in that. We had Authority and Zidua registered anyways, but Authority Supreme is registered. So that is in our guide. It just doesn't have sunflowers on the product page, or it isn't in this table because that got registered after our guide had gone to print. So regardless of what type of sunflowers you're going to grow, that is, you need to be looking at one of these products here, and again, take a highlighter, highlight your products that have residual, also Authority Supreme, and look at the weed spectrum and look at what some of the problems you anticipate having. Now, after that, depending on what you've got, what herbicide system you're growing, I guess, with sunflowers, because you can grow the IMI tolerant or the group 2 tolerant. There's a couple of different kinds of group 2 tolerant sunflowers, or there are conventional sunflowers. Either way, your weed products are very limited. This is a very short list of products. Really, it's in the guide because there is some supply out there, but realistically, you're not going to find any of that. There's the odd little bit out there. We keep products in the guide until they have disappeared out of the retail system. So realistically, though, you're not finding any assert. You're not going to get it. There's very, very, very little of it out there. You've got lots of grass products like your Assure, like your Post, like your Solo, and your clethodim here, your Selector, your Centurion. Now, again, depending on what product if you've picked a herbicide tolerant sunflower, then you could be using Express, or you could be using the IMIs in crop. If you're using a conventional sunflower, then obviously those are not used. Those are off the table. That is not a good idea. So again, extremely limited list. There is no point putting sunflowers in the ground if you're not using a residual upfront, because you have so few options in crop. And again, if you are picking one of an IMI tolerant or an SU tolerant soybean, sunflower, then we do have lots of issues with group 2 resistant weeds. So you need to be putting in one of these products that obviously are from different groups. This is group 14, this is group 3, there's a 14, a 3, and a 15, and again, that's a 14 and a 15, and then Authority Supreme is a 14 and a 15. So you have to be using those weed groups because of resistance. So when we're looking at recropping, though, this is where you look earlier in the guide before the weed tables, and that here on page 89 of the current guide, there is this recropping restrictions for residual herbicides. And what you do in this case is you find your crop sunflowers, and basically this is how you would easily find what you have to watch for. And basically any of your IMI products, like here's Aries, there's also Clomazone, which is your command charge, or your Trigon, which is one of the new products. Also Clopyralid, Dicamba also is something to watch out for. Those are at least 2 years. And if there's no data, if there's nothing in here, then there's no data. But basically anything where you'd have to be watching residues on that. So there's 2 pages here on this recropping restrictions. And again, here are these IMIs. If there are IMI tolerant sunflowers, but if you're not growing one of those, you do have to be careful with the IMI residue in the soil. And again, there's Metribuzin in there, that's Sencor. And here's Permit, that's a sulfonylurea. And this is basically your sulfonylureas again. So you really have to watch your group 2s and clopyralid and that. So this is, you can look at this table. Now also too, when you're looking at this table for some of your other crops, I just want to mention, make sure you watch the asterisks. In some cases, you know, it'll say it's okay to grow, but there's an, you know, say, you know, after, you know, if there's an asterisk, then read down here. Lots of times there's restrictions, added restrictions. It'll depend on rainfall, that type of thing. So be really careful with this table. This is a good place to start, but then go to those product pages and watch your recropping restrictions. That is on your the recropping restrictions are on every product page under towards the end of the product pages for each particular product, and it's under restrictions, and that's where we also have like the grain, the grazing and the days to harvest or pre-harvest interval and all that type of thing. The recropping restriction is there as well, but this table is a good place to start. So those are your products you'd have to watch for residues in the soil. If you've had any of those, you've got to be at least 2 years out on those products that are in here. And I think, Lionel, you were going to mention about the weed control guides.
Yeah, I just got one more point. I was just waiting to make sure you
sure.
were done there.
Yeah.
A comment came in about express tolerant sunflowers.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, so
Oh, yeah.
that could be an option, I guess, or something that where I guess.
Hang on. Yeah, if you have express tolerant sunflowers, then you can use express. So not a lot in here. So here's express here. If you can see my pointer, express SG, C-tribenuron. So you'd have to see that in the guide. Again, I apologize, our page numbers are not there. Not a lot of weeds listed here on this particular table, but again, that is, and again, end use on where those sunflowers are going, that type of thing. But we do have a couple of herbicide tolerant systems. They are both group 2 herbicide tolerant systems. So there is this express tolerant sunflowers. There's the IMI tolerant sunflowers. That's where you'd be able to use a product like Imazamox here, like that's our Solo, or Imazamox imazethapyr. And so that's our Odyssey, and you would be able to use those products if it's an IMI tolerant. And then again, your conventional sunflowers, though, you would not be able to use those at all. And if you do watch down here, you'll see this asterisk in here where it says apply to only Clearfield sunflower varieties. And then again here, express sunflower varieties only. So again, always watch your little numbers here and follow to the bottom of the table. And again, but the problem with those two systems, again, market access, make sure where you're planning on selling these soybeans will, you know, is accepting that would be accepting that product. I think that would be something you would know up front before you choose that system, but also know that we do have a number of group 2 resistant weeds in the province, and group 2 resistance is growing. So you would, you know, you would maybe see some of the weeds not controlled by those IMI products or that sulfonylurea product express because of resistance. So again, crucial that you're using one of the other long residuals as a pre-product.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kim. That's all the questions I have for you now. So I'm going to get Lori to turn the screen over to me. And I've got a few slides to go over. Kim had mentioned that the field crop production guide is available and for 2022. And I'll be giving you the 1-800 number, which is probably one of the easiest ways if you're looking at making any type of bulk order of the book, or even just wanting to find out where a good location would be to go pick them up. So I'll be giving that number out shortly, but those books are available. And so if you're wanting them or are in need of them, you know, I guess for one of the first places you could start would be by giving the ag adaptation specialist a call, and there's our contact information. So if you wanted to do that, we could definitely put you in contact with or get the books for you, or especially if you're a business that's looking at bulk books, it would be probably easier to go through that. Again, here's another slide with our livestock specialists. Again, good people for information, and they would also be able to give you good contact information as to where to get those books. there's the phone numbers, and I just wanted to kind of flip through to the slide fairly quickly here, but there's the MASC offices and their numbers. There's the 1-844 number that is the 1-800 number that you can contact to get the books, especially on a bulk order form or just any general information. Our crop scouting panel is going to be on again this year, so I just wanted to put a slide up to show that we're preparing for next month, where we'll be starting to do the crop talk on a weekly basis. Reminder, the drought assistance programs, the deadline for invoices and payment of invoices is approaching. April 15th is the deadline for that. So if you're still in need of or have are still looking to buy feed, you have until the 15th of April to have the invoice and paid for by that time period in order to get your application approved by the program. That deadline is needed to be, all invoices and payments needed to be made on or before that day. Again, our 1-800 number that's there, our Manitoba hay listing number that's for people that are still looking for feed. There is still a little bit of feed available out there, so if people are looking, do check that. One slide I wanted to put up, and I wanted to wish Réjean Picard a happy retirement. This says he retires the end of the month, so we're going to be down one specialist for a while here. Réjean has been in the department for I'm going to say 34 years, at least good 30 plus years, and has definitely been a great colleague to work with. He's always busy doing different projects, and we're gonna miss his input. But have a good retirement, Réjean, and we'll be talking to you. And our next webinar is going to be on April the 6th. So next Wednesday, as we start into our weekly webinars. So thanks for attending today, and hope to see everybody next week. Thanks. Bye.